War, a word that immediately brings to mind pain and loss. But why, in today's modern world, where humanity continuously strives for peace, does war still persist? And what keeps these flames of conflict from being extinguished? Let's uncover the reasons and hidden truths behind the enduring presence of war in the world in this video. 1. Economic motives. The pursuit of resources and economic competition are two major causes of conflict. Resources like oil and gas are critical weapons in modern warfare. The Middle East, with its vast oil reserves, has always been a hotspot for conflicts, such as the Iraq War in 2003, which is believed to have aimed at controlling oil. More recently, the Russia-Ukraine conflict has also revolved around energy, with Russia leveraging gas supplies as political pressure and targeting the resource-rich Donbass region. In terms of economic warfare, the US and China have engaged in trade conflicts involving sanctions and tariffs, significantly impacting the global economy. The South China Sea is another area where economic interests are at stake. China's construction of artificial islands to assert sovereignty has sparked opposition from countries like Vietnam and the Philippines. As a resource-rich area and a critical global shipping route, control of the South China Sea determines significant trade advantages worldwide. 2. Conflicts over power and territory. Territorial ambitions and the balance of power are two major drivers of war. The Kashmir dispute between India and Pakistan has led to 3 major wars since 1947 due to its strategic importance for water resources and trade routes. In the South China Sea, China's claims based on the controversial 9-dash line have heightened tensions with neighboring countries like Vietnam and the Philippines, pushing the region closer to military confrontation. Regarding the balance of power, Russia's actions in Ukraine aim to prevent NATO's expansion and reaffirm its status as a global power. Similarly, tensions along the Ladakh border between China and India highlight both nations' ambitions to assert dominance in South Asia. These conflicts underscore how territorial and power struggles continue to shape international relations. 3. Religion and ideology. Religion and ideology have been fundamental causes of many wars. The Sunni-Shia divide in the Middle East, which has persisted since the 7th century, has fueled conflicts such as the Syrian civil war, where Sunni groups oppose the Shia-led government of Bashar al-Assad. Saudi Arabia, Sunni, and Iran, Shia, have also exploited this divide to vie for regional power, notably in the Yemen conflict. Extremist groups like ISIS manipulate religious beliefs to incite violence and recruit members, further complicating these conflicts. Regarding ideology, the Cold War exemplified the clash between democracy and communism. Proxy wars such as the Vietnam War saw North Vietnam backed by the Soviet Union and China, while the US supported South Vietnam. Similarly, in Afghanistan, the US funded anti-Soviet forces, but this left a legacy of instability and the eventual rise of terrorist groups. 4. External interference. Proxy wars and arms trade are significant factors that prolong conflicts and exacerbate their consequences. In proxy wars, major powers use smaller nations as pawns to assert their influence. In Syria, the civil war became a proxy conflict with the US supporting opposition forces, while Russia and Iran backed the Assad regime. The result was catastrophic. Hundreds of thousands of deaths, millions of refugees, and a devastated nation. Similarly, in Yemen, the conflict between the Iran-backed Houthis and the Saudi and US-supported Yemeni government has led to one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. The arms trade also fuels prolonged warfare. The US, Russia, and China, as the largest arms exporters, provide weapons to warring parties. In Ukraine, the US and NATO supplied advanced weaponry, while Russia leveraged its vast arsenal and sold weapons to allies, escalating destruction. In the Middle East, arms supplied by the US and Europe have created dependencies, perpetuating violence. Meanwhile, in Africa, illegal arms trafficking sustains rebellion. 5. Internal political factors. War is sometimes used by leaders as a tool to divert public attention during times of internal unrest. For example, in the Falklands War, 1982, the Argentine government invaded the Falkland Islands to rally domestic support, temporarily shifting focus away from economic and political crises, despite ultimately losing the war. Similarly, in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, President Putin has framed the war as a defense of national security and an effort to stop NATO expansion, sparking patriotism and unity among the Russian population. Additionally, weak or unstable governments create opportunities for extremist groups to rise. After the 2003 invasion of Iraq, dissatisfaction among Sunni communities and ethnic divisions enabled ISIS to expand its influence, spreading conflict across the region. In the Sahel region of Africa, extremist groups exploit governmental weakness in countries like Mali and Burkina Faso, launching attacks and escalating violence across the area. 6. The failure of the international system. The international system often struggles to prevent wars due to a lack of deterrence. The United Nations, with its Security Council structure granting veto power to 5 permanent members, the US, Russia, China, the UK, and France, is frequently paralyzed during conflicts. In Syria, the war has dragged on for over a decade because Russia and China vetoed intervention resolutions, while the US and its allies rejected Russian proposals. Similarly, in Ukraine, the UN has been unable to take direct action as Russia holds veto power, allowing the conflict to escalate with devastating consequences. Conflicts of interest among major powers further prolong wars. In the South China Sea, the US and its allies oppose China's expansion but lack a unified strategy, while Southeast Asian nations have differing stances, complicating the situation. In Yemen, conflicting interests among Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Western powers have stalled peace efforts, as each side backs factions aligned with their own goals, leading to an unending cycle of violence. 7. Culture of violence and historical hatred. The legacy of war often leaves behind long-lasting hatred, becoming the spark for future conflicts. In the Balkans, after the breakup of Yugoslavia, ethnic and religious tensions between Serbia, Croatia, and Bosnia led to bloody wars despite peace agreements. In the Middle East, the Israel-Palestine conflict has persisted for over 70 years, rooted in territorial divisions after World War II, with deep-seated grievances over land and religion, keeping the region in perpetual tension. In some societies, a culture of violence becomes entrenched. In Afghanistan, decades of war have normalized bearing arms and joining armed groups. In Somalia, Al-Shabaab exploits government weakness to maintain power, turning violence into a survival tool. Additionally, in some nations, using military force to suppress opposition is considered legitimate, creating an endless cycle of conflict. The consequences of this culture of violence and historical hatred are persistent conflicts and lost opportunities for development. When violence and hatred are deeply ingrained, reconciliation becomes nearly impossible, causing wars to repeat and affected regions to stagnate. War legacies also hinder nations from focusing on economic, educational, and social growth, as seen in many African countries burdened by prolonged poverty due to the costs of war and constant instability. War, despite bringing pain and loss, remains an undeniable part of human history. But what can we do to strive for a more peaceful future? The answer doesn't lie solely in the hands of governments or international organizations. It also depends on the awareness and actions of each individual. What's your perspective on this issue? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your views. If you found this content helpful, don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe to help spread meaningful knowledge. See you in the next video.